So here we go with week 2 of the VMBO program. I hope you've managed to figure everything out up until now. So today's signpost questions, the topic today is vocabulary, and the signpost question today is: how does this theory that you'll be learning today match to how vocabulary is taught and learned at your school? So what is it we're going to be looking at today? We're going to be mainly looking at vocabulary learning and teaching, of course, in the lower school, because without grammar, very little can be conveyed, but without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. Vocabulary is vital to language teaching and language learning. So by the end of this video, I hope you formed an opinion on how to teach vocab and what vocab to teach. Vocab is a huge topic, so as in fact are all the skills and systems, but so please don't think that after this one session you'll know it all. This is literally just the tip of the iceberg, and you'll have to keep reading up a lot more on this. So I'm now going to show you some Gaelic words and expressions. I'm not going to say them. You'll see them on the screen next to me here probably for about 1 minute. I want you to try and memorize them. Don't write them down, just read them. I'll come back to them at the end, so literally just read what's there and I'll get back to it and explain why later. Okay, so off we go again. We've had a bit of Gaelic that you've had to read, and now what I'd like you to do is to pause the video so that you can take the time to read the text, which is down underneath this video, marked Senso di Fame. The text is also copied here, but you'll probably not be able to read it very easily. But down below you'll find a text. What I'd like you to do is to read the text and then complete the assignment that's also there in that Word document. When you've finished doing that, come back over here again and push play. Okay, so pause now. And you thought you were here for English. Okay, so you've had a bit of Italian reading. What you see now on the screen are typical questions that teachers should be asking of their pupils before even allowing them to read a text, such as the text that you've just read. For the sake of recording this video and the logic of asking questions and not getting answers, because obviously it's not an interactive video, I wasn't able to do this in the correct order. It is essential, as we'll see later, that you activate the pupils' prior knowledge, warm them up for what it is they're going to be reading and learning. Now, with regards to the text that you've been reading, if you have a look at the words from the handout, you probably used a number of strategies to guess some of the words. Most words you will have guessed will be closely related to English or French. There are just 2 words here which are not helped by the relationship with English, namely, and I'm going to mispronounce them, but sovrappeso, which is a word which comprises 2 words, sovra and peso, which means overweight, and leggere, which is to read, which you might have guessed from the words following on from it from the rest of the text. Now, these are examples of the strategies which good language learners such as yourselves use. These are then also some of the strategies which we need to teach our pupils, such as guessing from context, relating words to words in our own language which sound similar, etc. So strategies are important things which your pupils may not yet have mastered, but it is important that you teach them how to use strategies. One of the ways you can do this is by literally doing a text out loud. So you look at a text, but you verbalize what you're thinking. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at the picture. What do I see here? Ah, I see there's a heading. It says that. I see this word. What does it mean? Perhaps it means, etc. So you demonstrate out loud. You'll feel a bit silly when you do it the first time, but it really will help children to understand the type of strategies that you, a good language learner, use, which help. Okay, I'm going to do another demonstration. I'm going to play with your mind a bit, just to give you an idea of what it's like learning vocabulary lists. So what I want you to do is to listen and don't write. When I'm finished, pause the video, write down as many words as you can remember, and when you're done, push play again. We'll do it with 2 lists, and at the end, I'll tell you what the results are, and you can always rewind to check which words you missed, etc. So I'm going to be reading these words in Dutch, so you'll have to excuse my pronunciation,
But here we go.
But here come the first 14 words. Listen, don't write. Draad, speld, oog, naaien, scherp, punt, prik, hooiberg, doorn, pijn, injectie, spuit, stof, breien. Now pause and write. Okay, so welcome back. I wonder how many words you managed to get. Here comes the second list. So we're going to do the same thing again. 14 words, you listen to them. When I've finished, you pause and you write down what you can remember. Here we go. Bed, rust, wakker, moe, droom, dekbed, dutten, sluimeren, snurken, tukje, gaap, kussen, nacht, suf. Now pause again. Welcome back. Now before you rewind just to check the words to see which ones you did or didn't get, I wonder, do you have the word naald on your first list? And do you have the word slap on your second list? If you have either of those words, then that is your brain playing tricks with you, because I promise you, and you can rewind just to check, I did not read either of those words. Now, have a rewind, listen to the words again, and then get back to me here, okay? Okay, so as you can tell, I didn't read the words naald and slap. What this means is our brain actually invents words. You think you've heard something and you make an automatic connection to the same topic because these words should have been there. It's almost like we store certain topic words into a little drawer, and when we hear one of those words, we open up the drawer and pull out all the words that belong in that drawer. So thinking in terms of education, how do you feel therefore about offering words thematically? There are some major researchers who say that you shouldn't, yet as you can tell from this, our brains seem to create these automatic links to thematic words. The words have a similar theme, but not a similar spelling, because that would be confusing. But the theme is clearly saved in a certain way in our brain. So how about asking kids to prepare a text such as this one above that you can see here at home? Then they come into class and you ask comprehension questions. You then could, for example, give them a test on the words, whereby they write or they speak the words in a context. If the pupils have prepared well, then they'll understand the meaning of all the words. After doing exercises in class, then they should also be able to use these words productively. So the deal is, you don't go through the text in the old-fashioned way in class. You let the pupils do that for homework, and the exercises involved in the text you do together in class. Often the hardest words to remember and explain are not the nouns and the verbs, but abstract words such as often. That's very, very hard for you and also for children to explain. But if they're preparing it at home, they have the time and the individual attention to look at these words. As we just discovered in the test that you've just done, it's actually a good idea to use groups of thematic words as well when learning. It's also important as a teacher to realize there are so many ways of explaining things with no need to actually revert to Dutch. You can use images, you can use descriptions, you can ask for semantic links, what words go with this, collocations, gap fills, and so on. But why not think about flipping your classroom and getting the pupils to prepare the texts at home so that you can go through them with them in class? So if you think about the previous text that was there, then you'll see that outside of the classroom we generally encounter new words in context. If we encounter them often enough, they'll move from our receptive vocabulary, the one that you just recognize, to our productive vocabulary, the one where you can actually use the words in speaking or in writing. But in order for that to happen, it's essential that we notice the words and that we realize that we need them. That is often where the teacher comes in. It is the teacher's job to assist noticing. So what does it mean to know a word? Word knowledge is very dependent on the culture, and by that I mean it could even be the culture of Amsterdam versus the culture of Maastricht, for example. If I say bird to you, what is the first thing you think of? For me, it might be a black bird, for example, but for somebody else it could be a toucan, depending on your culture and where you are from. The same then also applies when you hear the word palace. I would automatically think of Buckingham Palace. I'm British, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But you may think of a totally different thing. So if I say the word car in class, that doesn't mean to say that everybody is thinking of the same type of vehicle, and that applies to all different types of words. These are the very obvious words, but this applies to different types of words, so making it visual what you mean is very important for learners to get them on the same page. If we have a look at the vocabulary learning process, the brain interprets new information based on existing patterns. If there's no pattern waiting, i.e. the information is unfamiliar or there's no context, then new input is misinterpreted or might even be rejected. If there's a successful pattern match, it's encoded into the working memory. So prior knowledge activation, I keep mentioning prior knowledge, you will understand that it is absolutely important. But the prior knowledge activation sends then the related memory patterns to meet the new input. It goes along and says, hey, I know you, come on in. So building patterning opportunities, by that I mean multiple encounters of a word, helps us to move the pattern into our long-term memory. Our hippocampus, if you like, in our brain becomes larger and more efficient. So the activation of prior knowledge actually increases memory encoding. Prior knowledge is one of the best predictors of subsequent ability to read, comprehend, and learn. So what should you do in class? It's essential that you use activities using, if you like, following a sort of recipe. You give a small handful of input, an enormous dollop of practice, and then another enormous dollop of output. This should be repeated often in order to ensure full retention of the vocabulary you want pupils to learn. In order to help pupils with picking up vocabulary whilst reading from context, it's recommended that you use glossaries. Now we know from research that these are better in the margin. A glossary is a sort of a translation of the word, if you like, and it's best if it's in the margin to assist reading comprehension and learning in context. If they're in the margin, then your eyes don't have to hunt too far and the reading process is only minimally disrupted. Glossaries are also best if in English, so you give another meaning for the word or you put it in context in the margin. But in the first year of a VMB or Basis group, for example, you might consider using bilingual glossaries where the words are in Dutch, and moving gradually towards using English glossaries further up the school. But it is essential, if you're using Dutch glossaries, that the children have sufficient Dutch reading skills. You mustn't forget the pupils for whom Dutch is already a second or third language. However, you should nonetheless also teach children how to use a dictionary. It will assist in the learning process and makes them more independent of you. All pupils need frequent attention to vocabulary. Expanding rehearsal, what you can see written at the bottom of the screen there, is useful where you repeatedly practice but at steadily increasing intervals for the pupils. It's very important not to learn something once, practice it, test it, and then move on. Everything should come back. It should be cyclical. So what type of activities can you do in the class? Normally you'd introduce the topic. What do we know? What do the pictures say? Read the first and last sentence of the paragraph, etc. And only then do you go into word detail, like you can see on this slide. For example, find a word in paragraph 5 that means kindness. Underline all the verbs in paragraph 7. Find a word in paragraph 8 that means the opposite of praise. Underline any words you don't know. Can you still tell what the passage is about? This is a useful strategy for pupils to realize that they don't have to understand every word but can still get the gist of the text. Are the underlined words nouns, a person, a place, or a thing? Are the underlined words verbs, actions, expressions of feeling, expressions of emotion, etc.? Are the underlined words adjectives? What is it describing? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a size, a color, a shape, emotion, etc.? Okay, so you start with the prior knowledge. What do we know? The general information about the text and the pictures, and only at that point do you then dive into the more intricate things about the individual words, etc. Incidental vocabulary learning occurs mainly with frequently occurring words, for example, through a graded reader, if you use graded readers in your classroom. The text must be comprehensible, that is to say, at least 90% of the words on any given page must be known in order to pick up new words. Easy to test. Take a copy of a page, count roughly how many words there are on it, and ask pupils to underline the words that they don't know. If more than 90% of those words are not known, or if more than 90% of the words are known to the pupils, then the text is at a good level for them, for graded readers, for extensive reading. The context is essential for vocabulary learning. I can't emphasize that enough. It's not enough to learn lists of words. Rather, pupils must be given a relevant context in order to understand how the word is used and in what sort of situation or context. The way pupils practice these words must then also be clearly embedded in a context in order for them to be consolidated into their working memories and move therefore from receptive to productive knowledge. Now what we're talking about here is extensive reading. So through graded readers, I'm not talking intensive reading like the previous slide where you dive into the word and the meaning in each separate paragraph. But if you want pupils to pick up vocabulary through reading, general reading outside of class, through graded readers, they must know at least 90% of all words on any given page in the grade.
So here's a little example for you. To consolidate certain vocabulary, you can try this example. So you choose a painting or photo that makes you think of a story. Work it out in your head. You can even prepare it on paper. As a teacher, you can do that in advance if you like, and then you tell it in English.
So in class, you tell your pupils, I've been looking at a painting and a story came into my head. You then tell the story and you ask the pupils to imagine the picture that inspired the story and they draw it. They can then compare pictures in a small group and explain how they relate to the story, for example via iPad and shared whiteboards or just by showing each other. And then you can show them the original picture. Now what's happening here is they're practicing their listening skills, they're drawing things, and then in explaining things to each other they're practicing their speaking skills. And your sneaky version of it is not just listening skills but throwing in new vocabulary for them, and they will then, you hope, start to practice it when telling each other about their pictures and why they've drawn their pictures. When you show the original picture, then you can also discuss it with them and help them consolidate certain items of vocabulary. Okay, so I'd like to come back to the words that you learned at the top and see how well you did. So the first phrase that I had written down was what you see in front of you, Kimmerahashif, which means how are you? The second phrase is Haguma, which means I'm well. And the third phrase is Ishmisha Louise, which means I'm Louise. I'm very curious as to how you did. I imagine you probably didn't do very well, and that's deliberate. I'm throwing an unfamiliar language at you in the way we throw unfamiliar language at children in the class. I exposed you to this language. You were reading it just the once. That was it. Just the once. That is not enough for input. You should have had more input. You didn't get the chance to practice it, and you didn't hear it. You just saw it, and this is not a transparent language. We don't say it the same way we write it. It's just to give you an idea of what we often do to our pupils in the class and what we should not be doing. So here what you'll see, I don't know what's gone wrong with my webcam, but never mind. Here what you'll see is some links to some interesting documents you may like to read and some of the things that I've used when preparing this. Now, don't forget the kijkvragen, the questions, the signpost questions I asked you at the start. Think about them And please then head on over to the forum once you've done the reading that was assigned for this week, and let's have a discussion about vocabulary learning and teaching in your school. Thank you.